Friday, December 2nd, 2022. My name is Judy Herrera, and I'm in Camarillo, California. It is my honor and pleasure to interview George Wibben on behalf of the Conejo Valley Chapter, Daughters of the American Revolution, and Colonial Dames 17th Century for the Veterans History Project with the Library of Congress. This interview is being recorded by Ed Lynch from Advanta Videography and contains the reflections and memories of the veteran during his time in the Navy and Air Force. This is George's story. George, you were born December 4th, 1945 in Shawnee, Oklahoma. Your dad was a naval navigator of a blimp. You were the oldest of 9 children, and in 8th grade, you were taken to your grandparents to be raised in Stigler, Oklahoma. That's where you went to high school. Mm-hmm. Do you want to pick up your story there?
Yes, being the oldest of 9 kids, obviously back in those days it was kind of hard to keep things going. And my mother had remarried. I think my parents got divorced when I was 8 years old. Okay. So, and I started first grade when I was 4. So I kind of thought maybe they didn't want me in the house, so send me to school. But anyway, so as a result, and he was 10 years older than she was also. So he was ready to settle down. She wasn't. And so they got divorced at first 3 kids. They had 3 kids together, and then they got divorced, and then my mother remarried and had 6 more kids after that. Well, the 3 oldest ones were kind of in the way since we were from the other dad.
Yeah.
So when I was 12 years old, I was in the 8th grade, my brother and I and sister was dropped off at my grandmother's house, and literally dropped off, and my mother drove off. And then my sister went back and stayed with my dad. And so I stayed in Stigler and grew up there, went to high school, and graduated when I was 17. And I had a football scholarship to college and refused it and instead got married.
Oh, okay.
All the crazy things to do. Run off and get married that young. And so I went to school, and when I was, I think I was a sophomore. Yeah, I was a sophomore in college. Right at the end of my sophomore year, that's when they started canceling all college deferments. And at the time you could stay in college, and you were deferred from having to go in the military.
This was the Vietnam War.
Vietnam
right?
War. So they canceled all college deferments, and so I still wanted to go to college because all growing up. I'll go back a little bit. When I started working when I was 14 at an appliance store in Stigler, and had some pretty good mentors there, and they impressed on me the need for education, and nobody in my family had graduated from college. So I wanted to go to college badly, and so I instead of let my draft number come up, I joined the Navy Reserves, and there was a reserve squadron right there on the University of Oklahoma campus. So I joined, and everything was fine for a while, and then all of a sudden they started calling up the reserves, and my duty station was a tugboat in Orange, Texas. And being 19 years old from Stigler, Oklahoma, I thought, I don't want to go to Orange, Texas on a tugboat. And I thought, this is going to be awful. Now as I look back now, that was kind of stupid because that would have been pretty good duty. Pretty good duty down the Gulf of Mexico on a tugboat during Vietnam. But anyway, a 19, 20-year-old makes stupid decisions. So I went up to a petty officer, first-class petty officer, and I said, hey, I really don't want to go on a tugboat down to Orange, Texas. I said, how can I get out of the Navy? And he looked at me like, what? And here this guy was a full-term lifer, and this guy wants out. This 20-year-old guy wants out of the Navy, and he said, well, if you sign up for active duty, you can change any branch of service as long as you sign up for more years. I mean, the government wants people in service. So I said, okay. So I went to the Air Force recruiter and told him my story. And while I was in the Navy Reserves, they convinced me to go to the full boot camp, because reservists would go to a 2-week boot camp normally. But at the time, the Navy was trying to bring together a battalion of reservists to see if reservists could perform better in the military if they took the long boot camp, which is 90 days. And so they convinced me to do the 90-day boot camp. They said I'd be promoted quicker and I'd be thought of differently and all that. Of course, I bought that line then. So I went to the 90-day boot camp.
In Great Lakes, right?
Great Lakes,
Oh,
Illinois, January through March. So it was cold.
Oh, boy.
It was cold. And that was my first time that I really felt leadership, because I was made the recruit petty officer in charge of a 100-person battalion. And so my responsibility was to make sure that everything went well when the drill sergeants weren't around. Right. Myself, and there was some squadron people too also. But that was my first opportunity to have any kind of leadership role. So anyway, back I talked to the Air Force recruiter, and he said, well, since you went to the 90-day boot camp, he said, you can qualify for the boot camp bypass program. I said, oh, no kidding. I said, okay, so tell me more. So he told me all about it. You go there and you get your clothes and all this stuff, and then down to San Antonio, and then you qualify for the boot camp bypass program, and asked the drill sergeant about it. I said, okay, it sounds good. So they tested me and everything to decide what job I would do in the Air Force. And since I had been in electronics in the Navy, I was a fire control technician in the Navy, and then I had done a lot of electrical work at the appliance store. I passed the test and everything, and they decided I would be an aircraft radio repairman. Okay. So I went to Lackland in San Antonio for the boot camp, and I got there and I got all my clothes, and they gave everything to me and all that. So we were all lined up, and they said, anybody have any questions? And I raised my hand, and he said, come on. So I went up to the drill sergeant. I said, I'd like to talk to you about the boot camp bypass program. He said, what? I said, the boot camp bypass program. He looked at his buddy over. He said, hey, Joe, come here. He said, this blankety blank right here wants to know about the boot camp bypass program. I thought, oh, no, have I been screwed? I just knew. I thought, oh, no. I'd been sold a bill of goods. So I spent one whole night of just worrying like crazy that, oh, no, I'm going through a second boot camp. Now, the Air Force one would have been a lot easier than the Navy one because it was a lot shorter. But anyway, I thought, oh, no. So I didn't sleep that night, obviously. And then the next morning, the drill sergeant came up to me and said, hey, Wibben, he said, there is such a thing. He said, I checked into it, and he said, but you've had leadership responsibilities. You're a more tenured person here because you're 21 years old. And he said, if you stay, he said, we'll make you the dorm chief. I said, what? A dorm chief. He said, you won't have to do anything. You'll be in charge of everything and all that. And I said, well, to tell you what, Sergeant, I said, why don't you just give me my orders? I said, I don't think I want to go through another boot camp. He said, okay, so they made me a mess check, standing, taking people's passes at the mess hall at Lackland. So I was there for 2 weeks. Okay. And slept much better that second night. And so then I got my orders to Keesler Air Force Base in Biloxi, Mississippi, to go through, do you mind?
Yeah, no, take a minute.
To go through electronics training on the radios. And I was there for, I think it was like 7 months, the training was. And so then after
how did you keep in touch with your family during this time while you've been, did your wife go with you?
On good point, yeah.
Okay.
When I got to Keesler, I was making all of $22 a week, and my wife wasn't there with me at the time, and at the time we had a let me see, our son was 3 months old. Oh gosh. So they she came down with my son and to Biloxi, and we found an apartment for $50 a month. Oh gosh. And it was a rat's nest. But so we stayed there for a month, and then finally found a better place. So they were there with me during that whole 7 months and everything else. And so we spent the time there. Didn't make any money. Didn't have any money. And one little story. It was a duplex that we were in, and the guy next to me, the family next to me, he had one more stripe than I had, so he had more money we had. But anyway, nobody had any money down there, and I really like to have a drink of beer every once in a while, and So he and I went out and looked for 35 pop bottles to buy a 70-cent pack of beer. And that was one time during a whole year we were able to sit and enjoy life a little bit, as far as some of the luxuries, so to speak. Yeah. But I was there for 7 months and then got my orders to move to Altus Air Force Base in southwestern Oklahoma. And I was assigned to a SAC, Strategic Air Command Squadron, working on B-52s and KC-135 tankers. And we had several radios in those planes. So I was down there and cold, windy, desolate. I've never been down to that part of Oklahoma. And growing up in eastern Oklahoma where there are trees, in Altus there aren't any trees.
Oh gosh!
It's all flat land, and wind blows and snow and ice, and it was cold. That was, in fact, it's funny. One of the things that they always threaten us in the Air Force is that if you mess up, we're going to send you to Thule, Greenland, or Fargo, North Dakota. Because it's cold in the two places. And but Altus was just about like Thule, Greenland, as cold as it was in the wintertime.
So were your grandparents still alive at that time?
Oh yes.
Were you able to see them then?
Yeah, both my grandparents lived in their 90s. So and all of the families, all the ladies in our families had kids very young. My mother, she was 16 when I was born. My grandmother had her first child 13 and all that. So all of them were young.
Oh, good.
So yeah, I was able to see my grandparents and not my mother. I mean, when my mother dropped us off in Oklahoma, we didn't see her for a long time till Sharon's mom convinced me to see my mother.
Reach out. Yeah.
Reach out to her, so I did. And, but I was able to see my grandparents and everything during all that time. But they made it clear that come there and live with them, and they'll feed us and clothe us. But she said, when you're 17, you leave. I said, I got that one, and I left. I left the house when I was 17. Paid for my own college throughout. I didn't take any loans out or get any money from anybody. So it took me like 12 years to go through college, throughout the military and all that kind of stuff. Mowing lawns and everything else, and finding the cheapest colleges to go to. At the time, the University of Oklahoma wasn't too expensive. Oh, okay. So I was down in Altus for probably 9 months, I guess, and I immediately started thinking, boy, the Air Force people don't keep you very, very long in any one place, because I was going to be on my third duty assignment, just real quick, and so I think that was probably 1969. So I would have been about 24 years old. They sent me to what I thought was the end of the earth, March Air Force Base in Riverside, California. I thought I was going to die there because everybody knew that the earth was California was going to fall off in the ocean. So I actually bought that one. So went to March, another SAC squadron, and much bigger though, a lot more B-52s. And they had flying command posts there. So those flying command posts are in the air all the time, and we had 10 radios on each plane. Wow. So it was pretty busy there. And a lot more activity going on out in March, because they were, planes were flying over to Guam and places such as that all during Vietnam. And one of my favorite things I picked up there in March was I loved working on launch trucks. I just really, I love the excitement of the plane being on the end of the runway, ready to take off. And you'd be sitting there in the launch truck with a radar guy and a bomb nav guy and an ECM guy, and all of a sudden they say radio and opt on the B-52 sitting on the runway, and all of a sudden we'd drive right to the plane. They'd have all 8 engines running, and you run right down the middle of the plane, climb up into the hole and get inside the bomb bay where the radios were, and work on them. I just loved doing that. I hated working on a bench, working on a radio, so I loved doing that, and did that. I volunteered for every launch truck, and Red Ball would come in. They'd run us out there if it wasn't a big launch, a big alert launch. A funny story is a buddy of mine that I was in the Air Force with for 4 years. We were at H base together, and every time they would call Red Ball radio, and we were all in the shop, he'd run to the bathroom. His stomach would get upset. He'd have to go to the bathroom. And I didn't think anything of it until after a few years. I thought, wait a minute, every time a red ball comes in, Tom runs to the bathroom, and I get on a truck and go out to the lawn. But I like doing that. But the weird part of that is when he got out, he got a disability check for the rest of his life because his stomach, because he didn't take the red balls.
Oh, gosh.
I tease him to this day about that.
Wow.
I said, you blankety blank. I mean, you get a check every month now. And I took the red balls.
So could you explain a little bit about what a red ball is for those of us who don't?
Well, when you you have these planes on the end of the runway, and like I said, there was one person from each shop there, and we helped each other. Like I helped the radar guy, and he always helped me. And if the radio was out, they couldn't talk to the tower. And and the B-52, for example, only had like 2 radios in it. It had a high frequency and then ultra high frequency. And the high frequency one, you could talk. I could talk to the Philippines from California, and so they had to have them working, and it would ground a plane.
Oh.
Some of the other systems would not ground a plane, but a radio would ground it because they can't talk to the tower. So, we would. Like I said, I love doing that. I love the excitement of it. Got into trouble a couple times because one time a B-52 was in the runway, and I had to install a radio, and the radio was 80 pounds, so you had to they thrust you up into the bomb bay, which you have to jump up and kind of do a chin up. They pull you up in there. Well, I was changing the radio, and the pilot come on and said, "Sergeant, you gotta lock it up." He said, "We're going." I said, "Oh yeah, I'm just about finished." He kept on. He said, he started revving the engines up. He said, "We're going," and I said, "No, you're not." And I keyed the microphone button, so he couldn't talk to the tower. "I'm ordering you to release that button." I said, "I'm not flying in the bomb bay of a B-52, at 50,000 feet with no oxygen and all that." And so I finished up the job and jumped out of the hole. And as he was taking off, and we were running along, fastening up the door, and of course he turned me in and everything else. And when I got back, an E9 called me in and chewed me out. And then he said, "By the way, I'd do the same thing." He said, after he chewed me out.
Oh, gosh.
So, but there were stories like that and everything. But the main thing was get the planes off the ground,
Yeah.
and get them on time and service properly. But I was at March for not quite a year at March even, and then.
And you were promoted?
I was promoted sergeant there at March, and we had a pretty big squadron of people, and made a lot of fun guys there, and fun families and everything. And that was the first time when I was eligible to go to the NCO club, so you started meeting different people and seeing different things, and that was when I really started liking the Air Force. Which surprised me because I didn't think I was going to like California, but I really started liking the Air Force when I was out in March, and it became more of wasn't a job anymore. It was more of a career. I could start seeing myself thinking about staying in and everything. But then I got orders to go to Okinawa, Kadena Air Force Base in Okinawa.
Wow.
But it was to a TAC squadron, Tactical Air Command, and I always thought we were all SAC train killers, and we're all SAC people, and it was the biggest base, the biggest planes, and all that, and all of a sudden you're going to have me work on fighters, and and it's like I've never been on a fighter before. I've been on the big planes where you walk in and all that, and all of a sudden we're working on fighters, and but my buddy, who had been in the Air Force with the whole time, went to the other side of the base, to the SAC side, working on B-52s and flying to Vietnam and all that. And I was on the TAC side. Well, he worked 12-hour shifts 7 days a week, and I was 8 to 5 on the TAC side.
Oh, what a shame.
Because we were supporting Gwangju, Korea. Oh. Our fighters were, and when you think about it, that was would have been 69, 70. Wasn't that far away from the Korean War. So, Gwangju was still kind of needed some protection and needed a presence of U.S. military. Well, the reason they sent me to that side of the base is there was a plane called an EB-66, which is it's a electronic countermeasures type plane. It's old plane, and it happened to have the radio that I was trained on in there. And that big radio that was in the back of the B-52s was on that little plane, which surprised me. And so they they sent me there, and when I got into the radio shop, come to find out I was the only one trained on that radio. So that's why I was sent to the tax side. And when I got there, the shop chief said, you need to train other people on this so you get to do your TDY to Gwangju. Well, being about 25 or 20, I thought, if nobody's trained on it except me, I won't have to go to Gwangju. So I never trained anybody else on the radio. But it's kind of, so I stayed at Kadena the whole 18 months that I was.
And your wife and son wouldn't have been able to.
No. Well, they could have. I could have afforded it, but I didn't have any money,
Yeah,
and didn't
right.
have any. There was no support in that, in any of the family members or anything. So, no, they didn't get to come.
So did they stay in California?
They stayed with my in-laws in Oklahoma.
Oh, in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, when I left, Greg was 2.5, and when I got back, he was 4. And
gosh.
yeah, it was quite a missing that time.
Yeah.
And
So how did you keep in touch? Did you write letters or?
because at the time there was this invention called a cassette tape.
Oh, yes.
And so I sent cassette tapes back and forth. And one of the things that was kind of funny about Okinawa, kind of in the middle there, it's south of Japan. You weren't in Vietnam, but you still had some tie to some of the combat stuff that came through there and all that. But there a lot of electronics. Sound systems were coming online a lot then, so everybody was buying that stuff. So I bought a fancy cassette player, and that in Noritake, China. Everybody bought Noritake.
Oh, right, yeah.
Noritake, China.
That's true.
But we sent cassettes back and forth.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were there in Okinawa for how long?
18 months.
18 months.
18
Okay.
months,
It was a long time for your wife. And
Oh yeah, sending money home and stuff like that, and I think we were up to $200 a month. I think then that's how much we were making. Wasn't a real lucrative job at the time. But,
well, how was the food? How were How,
it was good. It was really good,
Oh,
especially the SOS. it was good.
Yeah.
But it wasn't as good as the Navy food. I got to say that. So
Oh, okay.
the Navy food's always a lot better. And the other thing that one of the funny things that I saw the difference between Navy and the Air Force. Navy, when you go into the chow hall, nobody has rank. And they told us that nobody has rank and everything, and everybody is eating in a real quiet, or not quiet, but a bit talkative and relaxing atmosphere. Air Force, everybody had rank. They were pretty strict about that.
Okay.
Officers sat over here, and NCOs over here, and the other enlisted people sit over
like
there.
middle school.
Yeah. It was a little different, but the food was good throughout. And,
What did you do in your spare time? I mean, if your family wasn't there, what did you do on your downtime?
Well, it's funny. My close friend, I became my close friend while I was there. He was a sergeant also, but his dad was a bird colonel. Was a bird colonel. He retired. So Stan learned the officer way of doing things and all that, and he could BS his way through a lot of stuff. So we kind of got involved with the golf course there at Kadena, and they thought we were officers. We never said we were, but they just kind of thought we were by the way we dressed and the way we carried ourselves and things like that. So in the spare time, I played golf sometimes.
Nice.
It was $5 to play golf, which I had to save to do that, even spend that kind of money. But played golf, and just when I picked up golf at Kadena.
Oh, good. You still play today.
Oh yeah, still do.
Yes,
Still
you do.
Mhm.
And then, so then what happened when you came back? Where did you go after your 18 months?
I finished the 18 months. I came back one time for a TDY, temporary duty, to Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I came back. That's the only time I came back to the United States during that 18 months. Myself and a guy from Vietnam went to Cedar Rapids to verify the feasibility of a certain tech order on a new radio they were putting on the F-4 fighters. I mean, I don't know what the F whatever they're coming out with now, 20s or whatever, the 18 or 19, but these were F-4s, so you can tell you how long ago it was. And they had coming out with a new radio, so we came back for that and to verify that. But then I got discharged December 20th of 70, and it was the day after my son's birthday, 4th birthday.
Aw,
And so I got discharged in Travis Air Force Base in San Francisco.
yeah.
And that was during a time when military was not well thought of, especially in San Francisco. So they told us to throw all of our uniforms away and anything that referenced anything with military, and to go off the base, you'd get spit on. So we threw everything away. So I had nothing left, from the military, whereas some guys had the uniforms and all that.
Yeah.
I don't have anything. So I really don't remember how I got back to Oklahoma. I think they probably gave me a ticket. I'm not really sure.
Yeah.
But a lot of times they just let you go. And
Yeah.
so I got back to Oklahoma and spent a couple weeks with the in-laws, and then loaded up the car because I still was determined I was going to finish college.
There you go.
And up till then, I guess I probably had 2 years, 2 years of college under my belt. And then while I was in the Air Force, I took some courses too. They had University of Maryland had a lot of had ties with the Air Force throughout the military. So I took courses, and then same time I had a first class FCC license, and so I taught electronics courses to some of my buddies there, on the side. And so started learning. I like to teach stuff, and it was kind of fun. So when I got out, I was still determined to go back to college,
Good.
without a lot of support from that current wife. She wasn't big on colleges. She
Oh.
thought that was a waste of time.
Oh.
But I was determined I was going to go anyway. So I
you used your GI Bill?
used the GI Bill, and I think I made $340 a month.
Wow.
As long as I kept 12 hours, going 12 hours. So I knew I couldn't afford to go back to OU because I think the tuition was $7 an hour, and I didn't have that much money. So Central State University was $3 an hour. So
Okay.
I enrolled in Central State University. It was like 40 miles away from where I lived, but so I loaded the car up, decided to go to Oklahoma City, and everything we owned was in a two-door Chevy, and including furniture. So we pulled up to the first apartment that I ran into, South May in Oklahoma City, and walked in there, and I said, I'd like to see about an apartment. And he looked out the window and I said, where's your furniture and stuff? I said, that's it. He said, well, how are you going to sleep? I said, well, we'd sleep on the floor till I can afford to buy a mattress and all that kind of stuff. And I said, by the way, I said, if you happen to ever need anybody to fix stuff here, I said, I can fix anything. I said, I've been working since I was 14 years old, and I was electronics in the Air Force and Navy, and I said, I can fix anything. And he said, well, we're looking for a maintenance man right now.
There you go.
And so I thought, So they hired me right then.
Good.
And I said, okay, well, what kind? I need to get an apartment. They said, well, we'll furnish you an apartment, a furnished apartment. So all of a sudden, I mean, you talk about falling in a mud puddle.
Wow, yeah.
When I smelled like a rose, like, I can't believe this.
That's
And,
great.
we came here with nothing, and all of a sudden now we got an apartment, and I got a job, and everything. And it's like, this is crazy. It's all working out.
Good.
So I worked there until I graduated, and I was getting my bachelor's degree, finished my bachelor's degree, and this friend I talked about it throughout the Air Force just showed up at my apartment one day, and he says, hey, George, he said, you ought to come work for Xerox. I said, what's Xerox?
Yeah.
I never heard of Xerox. He said, oh, yeah, they're hiring tech reps. And I thought, tech reps? And I thought, well, back from when I was in the Air Force, every shop had a tech rep from like McDonnell Douglas, Collins Radio they had a tech rep sitting in the shop, and they did nothing. And I thought, well, I'd like to have that job. They did nothing except, if we couldn't fix something, we'd ask these guys, and they just BS their way or call somebody else. But anyway, I thought that sounded like a pretty good job. So I interviewed for the job. It was December, and they wanted me to hire on right then and quit school. I said, wait a minute. I said, I've been going to school for 12 years, 10 years that time. And I said, you want me to quit school to take this job? And I said, no, I don't want to work for you guys. So I walked out and thought, well, okay, I did that one. And so, I didn't have a job. Oh, I had still was a maintenance man and everything. So I thought, well, to be able, I might as well just go get my master's degree. could still get the GI Bill. And so I enrolled in the MBA program. And about a month later, I got a call from Xerox from a different manager. And he said, we want you to come work here. He said, that, we'll make you a premium hire because you got all this experience and all that. And my buddy had probably put in a few good words. And so I hired on with Xerox at the time. And I said, well, I'm going to school to get my master's degree. And they said, well, we'll figure out the time and all that. And they had college tuition and all that kind of stuff. So
nice.
it all worked out. So I hired on as a tech rep. And I tech rep for 7 months. And then I got promoted to operations manager at Xerox within 7 months, and stayed there for 30 years.
Oh, wow.
And retired from there. But that was a lot of fun being there and all that. But finished up my master's degree and did about a third of the way through a PhD. I don't know why I was doing that, because my boss at the time said it's a waste of money. He said, waste of time, you don't need to be a PhD. But so I did about a third of that, and then over the course of time. So I stayed there for 30 years to Xerox, and they come up with, and throughout my career there, I was district manager, region managers. I was head of quality for the corporation and service, and then had an international job the last 10 years of traveling all over the world. That's why I don't like to travel right now.
You're done.
Yeah, and there is where I met Sharon.
Okay.
Love of my life.
There you go.
Best person in the world.
I
At
agree.
Xerox, I was divorced, and I met her through a couple meetings and such as that. And one day, one of my guys come in, and he said, "Hey, did you hear Sharon Bailey got divorced?" I said, "No, I didn't. I didn't hear that." So I called her, and she was out in Los Angeles, and I said, "Hey, I hear you got divorced." And she said, "Yeah." I said, "You want to go on a date?" And she said, "Date?"
Where were you at the time?
I was in Dallas, Texas.
Oh, gosh.
I was region manager in Dallas, Texas. And so I said, "What date?" And she said, "Yeah, okay." So I bought a ticket, flew to Los Angeles to go have dinner with Sharon.
Oh.
And it was the beginning of,
Yes.
wonderful.
I know. How long have you two been married?
25 years.
Oh, nice.
25 years. And I was living with my son at the time in Dallas. He was divorced also. So we were bachelors. Greg was probably 25 or so, then 30. And then all of a sudden Sharon got promoted to vice president of Southern Region, first woman to get promoted to VP at Xerox. And she called me and she said, "Hey, I'm moving to Atlanta, Georgia. You want to move with me?" So I told my son, I said, "Get a roommate, buddy. I'm going." So we both moved to Atlanta. I met her in Atlanta, and we started our life there.
Nice.
Got married in Las Vegas, Elvis wedding.
Oh. So what did you do when you got there?
Where?
Because you were retired, right? So.
No, not that.
Oh,
at the
not
time.
then. You were
at
still
the time.
working?
Both
Oh,
of us,
okay.
both of us were at Xerox.
Oh,
and,
okay,
and we were hiding from our bosses that we were.
Oh, yeah, that you were.
We were living together, and at the time I was higher in a company than she was, so all that stuff, you run into sexual harassment and all that other
Right.
kind of stuff, and you don't know. In fact, the first time I kissed her, we were dancing. That night I went to the date. We at someplace in, I think, Universal Studio. There's a restaurant, and The Dance came on by Garth Brooks. I said, "Hey, you want to dance?" I don't like to dance anyway, but I wanted to dance with her.
Oh.
So it came on, and so I thought, "Gosh, she's sure holding me tight." Yeah.
It's her fault.
Yeah, so I thought, what am I going to do at the end of this song? I could kiss her, she could slap me and accuse me of sexual harassment, me being higher in the company than she was. She could back off, push me away, or she could respond. And so she responded. And so then we kind of hit it off pretty good. And a funny story I always tell my stepdaughter is that after dinner, and I thought, so she picked me up at the hotel, so she come drop me back. And I said, you want to come in for a drink and everything else? She said, "No, I think I'll go home." And I had cleaned my room up and everything, and she just let me off at the front door. My stepdaughter loves that story.
You got to work for it. Work for it. Oh, gosh.
But my stepdaughter loved that story.
Oh, I bet she did.
But
you ended up in Atlanta together.
Landed up in Atlanta, and both of us were still with the company. So, like I said, we were kind of hiding it from our bosses because they're not into work environment like that. And I was at the time I got promoted to the strategy office, worldwide strategy office. So I was the field person that justified the new strategies in service amongst all these other staffers from headquarters. And the funny story, she was VP of the Southern Region, and I come home one day and she was ranting around and blankety and cussing, and I said, "What's the matter?" She said, "This stupid strategy that they're coming. I have to implement this and everything." I said, which one are you talking about? And she told me. I said, I was the one that come up with that. She said, "What?" I said, "Yeah." I said, "I come up with it." And so we had a little bit of discussion. I said, "Look, it's my job to create. It's your job to implement." That didn't go over real well.
Just do it, right? Oh, gosh.
But so we, and so funny when we decided to tell our bosses what was going on between us. I went and told my boss. He was head of worldwide, some big worldwide job. He said, "You think I didn't know about you?" I said, "What do you mean, Chuck? What are you talking about?" He said, "You got snowed in Atlanta one time, huh?" He said, "You don't think I figured that one out?" And her boss knew the same thing. She said, "Oh, I knew about you guys a long time ago."
Oh, gosh.
So
then what happened?
So we kind of coexisted inside of Xerox and different jobs and everything. That would have been, let's see, we moved to Atlanta in 1996, got married in 97, and both of us left in 99. We went to Sharon was really good at handling customers, and so we went to Chastain Park one time entertaining customers, and and we had several Xerox customers there, and all of a sudden, as the concert was over, this lady walks up to Sharon, hands her a card, and said, "If you ever think about, I don't know what company you're at, but if you ever think about leaving your company, give me a call." And we looked, and she was the managing director of Spencer Stewart, which is one of the biggest search firms in America. So we just kind of put that card away. A couple of years later, Sharon got promoted to another job to Rochester, New York.
Oh, no.
So my job was actually in Rochester, but I lived in Atlanta, and I told them, I said, "There's no way I'm ever moving to Rochester because you go there and die."
Oh, snow.
And so they allowed me to have an apartment up there. All the time I was reporting in the headquarters. Well, then now all of a sudden Sharon's in headquarters. And so she come home one day, again ranting and raving about something. I thought, "Oh, what did I do? Did I come up with another strategy she didn't like?" And there was something about the headquarters and all that. And this was like 2 years after that lady had given her that card. I said, "Well," I said, "if you're tired of this," they said, "why don't you call that lady in that card?" "What do you mean?" She said, "I can't leave," because Xerox was pretty good at creating this environment where you felt so loyal to them that you didn't even think of leaving. And so I convinced her to call this lady, and it wasn't just a matter of time before she started getting calls. And she got a call from the airline recruiter, and they were looking for someone to head up in-flight service at Delta Airlines in Atlanta. And so all of a sudden they said, "Well, after several interviews, they said, we want to send you an offer letter. What's your fax number?" I thought, fax? We're in an apartment in Rochester. We don't have a fax. So I ran down to Circuit City and bought a facsimile machine, hooked it all up and everything, and I called them back, and then they sent the offer letter. And so all of a sudden, hey, we're staying in Atlanta, because we still kept the house in Atlanta, even though we had an apartment in Rochester. And Sharon became senior vice president of Delta Airlines, eighth highest job in the company. And she left in June of '99, and then in December of '99, they had an early out package. Well, I always had jobs that you couldn't qualify; they wouldn't let you take them because you had a critical assignment or something. And so I never could take any of these early outs, early retirements and all that. Well, they came up with one, and my job was not on the exclusion list. They said, you can't retire because your job. I said, "No, show me where it is. Show me on this." And they couldn't, so I took early out, retired. And so both of us left Xerox in 1999, and she went to Delta, and I started doing consulting work. for several different companies, Hewlett-Packard and Southwestern Bell, and then wound up at Storage Tech in Louisville, Colorado. I was there for 3 years. So I consulted for like 6 years, and then all of a sudden Sharon got a call from Walmart wanting her to think about going to work for Walmart as the vice president of the media, their whole media area. And so we went and interviewed, and went into Arkansas, flew into Arkansas in November. And growing up in eastern Oklahoma, you never went to Arkansas because it said only chickens over there. And so we flew into Arkansas, Bentonville, Arkansas in November of 2005. I thought, what is this? I mean, no, it was in 2004. So I thought, man, well, there's no leaves on the trees. There's nobody around. And that's where Walmart headquarters is.
Yeah.
And come to find out, Walmart and Tyson, everybody there. And and she had, they were usually, Walmart was big on promoting from within. And they were trying to bring some women, the leaders, into the company. Yeah. And she was the fourth woman to ever be hired outside as a vice president of the corporation. And she wound up being senior vice president. But so we moved there, of all places, and bought the most expensive house we ever bought in our lives there. And so and so when we got there, Sharon said, you've always wanted to teach. She said, why don't you see about teaching here? Said, and teaching at the university. I thought, She said, no sense I got this big job. You don't make a lot of money when you're teaching, as an adjunct. So I went down to the university, went into I went to meet a lady in a graduate college, and after we talked for a couple hours, she said, so why are you here? And I said, well, I want to get a PhD because I want to teach. So she went off and got 2 other people, and she said the same thing, tell me your story. Mm-hmm. So I did that with 3 different people, and they said, well, it'd be a waste of time to get your PhD. You don't need that. You got so much experience and all that. Well, you're called a pracademic. And said, well, why don't you teach right now in a graduate school?
Okay.
I said, graduate school? They said, so well, what do you want me to teach? They said, well, what do you think is what's your big expertise? I said, well, I'm pretty good at managing change. I can help get people through change. And they said, well, create a course in change and teach it to the graduate school. I said, okay.
Yay.
And so they signed a course designer to me. I mean, I obviously didn't know that much about writing a course, but so they assigned a course designer to me. And I wound up teaching for 10 years at the University of Arkansas, taught leadership, business ethics, change management. The biggest thing I did was I created a diversity course there. They didn't have, the University of Arkansas didn't have a really good track record on diversity. And they had a really nice plan. It's one of those things where you have a plan that 80% positive and good, but only 20% implemented. And I found the same thing. There was no accountability in the plan and all that. So I created a course called Creating and Leading a Diverse Workforce. Nice. Because coming from Xerox, that was one of the Xerox was it was always known as the Academy for Leadership. Okay. I mean, they sold courses in leadership. Yeah. And so they taught us a lot. I taught for 10 years at the graduate level and all that, and never had to read any of the books. I just opened, oh yeah, I know that. And so Xerox did a really good job of teaching us. And one of the things they taught us was valuing diversity. And they back it was probably mid '80s. Mm-hmm. They took us all through a value and diversity course, and it was pretty it was pretty firm to us that if you can't buy into this, have a good life, because you don't need to be here. And we lost about half of our leaders at that time. Wow. Some people stomped out of there and all that and everything, which is okay. Yeah. There's always somebody, I always told everybody, if you ever think that you're so valuable to anything, stick your hand in a bucket of water and swirl it around and see how big a hole you leave when you pull it out. And the same thing in corporations. They'll always find somebody to take your place. And but anyway, they taught us a lot about that. And You know, I was always huge on helping women. You know, because at the time at Xerox was all men. They said women can't fix things, women can't lead things, and all that. And I thought, I don't buy that, and I don't buy into that. So I hired the first female tech rep, and at Xerox, and that whole program we developed there just flourished throughout the company. And as a result, I had a lot of leaders move up in the company and have long careers and all that. So that was I felt like my biggest achievement there was to create a NAC course and a change management course. But I taught 4 courses every semester, including the summer, 4 different courses, so 4 different lesson plans and all that. And all my classes were always full. And just loved it. I really enjoyed doing that. And one story I thought of because of retirement, I thought about when I was at Okinawa. I'll go back to that.
Sure.
I really loved being in the military. I loved it because of the responsibility that you had, the leadership opportunities you had. I mean, for young kids to have some of the responsibilities, I mean, it was unbelievable. You look at 20-year-olds working on a B-52 bomber and everything, and things like that. So that accountability, and I've always believed in all those kind of things. You know, growing up, leaving home at 17 and not having any safety net under and all that and everything else, the Air Force just fit right in. Military fit right in, and so I really liked it. So I was called in by a senior master sergeant to reenlist.
Oh, yeah.
And trying to get me to reenlist. You know, I was in a critical job, so they would have given me a big reenlistment bonus, big at the time. And so I said, Sarge, I said, you know, when I left, my son was 2.5, and they said he's 4 years, coming up on 4 years old. I said, you guys don't get it. He said, what? I said, you really don't get human behavior, do you? Because I said, if you had sent me over here at the first of my tour, I said, I would have forgotten about it. Because I said, I would have been over here for 18 months, that first 18 months, and then I would have been to Las Vegas or wherever else you'd send somebody. And I said, I would have forgotten about this, being away from my family this long. But I said, I can't do it because of that right now. And he said, well, Wibben, you know, the thing about you, he said, I've watched you a lot and everything else. He said, it's going to be your biggest problem in life. He said, you think too much of your family. I said, what?
Wow.
I said, too much of my family. I said, well, Sarge, I got to say this too. I said, I think of my family and everything else. And I said, and you don't. That's why you're going to be sitting here and I'm going to be getting on the plane, leaving here and going back home. But he didn't like that. But anyway, it wasn't being insubordinate, but it just,
Right.
So anyway, that was kind of the story. But so I taught there at the university, and then in 2016, Sharon decided to retire, and I thought, well, and you know, I'd been teaching for 10 years, and I started seeing such a change in the students. I mean, when I first started teaching, they really wanted to be there, and after 10 years, this entitlement mentality of so many of the students. And you know, the way we had to change the curriculum and all that, and I was very open with students about here's the way things really work in life and everything, and I just saw a difference in students, and then there was you had less flexibility as a professor to do the things you wanted to do, and they started telling you things, and I thought, this is not what I signed up for. So when she retired, I decided to retire too, and then we decided, well, we got married in Las Vegas, so we decided to move to Las Vegas. So we rented a place in Las Vegas, and we still have a place there now.
Yeah.
And but then in 2017, Sharon was diagnosed with breast cancer.
Yeah.
You know, we had a place in Las Vegas, like I said, and so we also had a place in Bentonville. We never sold that one, and so we sold the house, but we had a lake house out at the lake, Beaver Lake, and so she had all of her surgery and everything there in Northwest Arkansas, and then we decided to. One day we were visiting some friends, and they kept saying, why don't you get a place here in California? And I said, California? I said, George Wibben live in California? And so, it's a funny thing, we had a CD, certificate of deposit, coming up due, and I was complaining about there's no interest rate, you don't get anything for it anymore. And this guy said, well, why don't you just buy you a place in Camarillo? And I thought, He said, you can buy it with a CD. And so I thought, So I got to looking, sure enough, and found Leisure Village and walked around and thought, man, I kind of like this place.
Golf course?
Yeah, the golf course is flat and all the amenities and all that. And so Sharon and I decided to just get us a crash pad. Our kids live 10 miles from here in Thousand Oaks. And I got tired of visiting them sleeping in their third bedroom and, no privacy whatsoever and everything. So I said, let's just buy a house at Leisure Village and, crash pad. So we looked for the smallest place we could find. That was still nice. And bought a place over in another village, and it was pretty nice. And so we enjoyed that and didn't have to sleep in the third bedroom anymore and didn't have to bother them and everything. So we had that house for a while, and then I got tired of not having a big garage, because we left the house Bentonville with 4 garages and then come here with 1. We had 3 cars, and obviously we had too much of everything, and we've since downsized a lot of stuff. But bought this place here that we're in, and much bigger, and love it. And so now we still and we sold our lake house in Arkansas, and we partner with another couple on 2 houses and a boat and all that. So they live there, we live there, and this is ours. And they're building one in Vegas too, so we'll all have different places. But yeah.
So I know Ed'll want to know. So if you reflecting back on your time in the military, what's the one thing that you feel that you took away from that experience that helped you through the rest of your life? Because obviously you lived a very good life.
I think accountability, I would say that's at top of the list. No excuses for stuff. If I messed it up, I tell you I messed it up and I'll fix it. And never pass something on to somebody else. I just, so I think accountability and that responsibility for things and doing a job right just drives me nuts when people do sloppy jobs. And all my years at Xerox, managing tech reps and things like that. One thing they'd probably tell you, George goes nuts when he sees a dirty machine, when he sees that you didn't do your job and a customer would get their shirt dirty from, I would. They kind of, sometimes they think, oh, yeah, because I would go nuts, because that's what their job was to do, is to do it right. And why do it? Why have to be sent back to do it the second time? And so I think accountability and responsibility, and that's always been the case, and you do your job. And I don't, all my years, I never put up with people's BS about not doing their job. One story, when I was the first line manager at Xerox, they gave me the major account team, and they gave me all the dissident employees. I would say you gave me all the dissident employees, and at the time I thought, I'm not putting up with anybody's BS. And University of Oklahoma was one of the accounts. We had 5 technicians down there, and I had heard about these guys. And they were all good technicians and everything. But I told Sharon, I said, I'm not putting up with these guys. I'm not putting up with all their stuff. So I went down there, and the first time I met them, and I threw 5 newspapers on the table. And they said, what are these for? I said, you guys have tomorrow off. I said, I've already got your calls all covered from dispatch. I said, you're going to find another job.
Oh, gosh.
And I said, I want you looking for a job tomorrow. And I said, if you don't find a job and decide not to do that, when you come back the next day, I want a different attitude, because I'm not going to spend 5 minutes trying to change your attitude. You choose your attitude. I'm not going to deal with it. I've heard managers trying to talk you guys into doing your jobs. I said, you're going to do your jobs, or I'll get you. And I said, you know as well as I do, a boss can get you if they want to. And I said, I'll get you, and you'll be out of here. Because Xerox had a pretty nice career program, a really nice everything. And I said, so you go find another job or come back here the day after tomorrow with a different attitude. They grumbled a little bit. And bottom line, the three of them wound up being tech specialists. They totally changed, and it was like people had put up with their BS over all the years. So that's kind of I've always believed in that, and I don't expect anybody to put up with my BS either. And I learned that a lot from the military and from my mentor when I was at the appliance store. He didn't put up with anything either. And we put up with too much stuff, I think, from people, that people excuse their way out of things.
Well, we thank you for your service, George.
Well, thank you.
We really do.